Okay, so that... Oh my god, no!
Alright guys, welcome to another video. Today at XF Motorsports we have a CLS 55 and there is a good reason why the hood is open on it, because this engine has a broken piston inside it. This is probably the most unluckiest used car story you guys are ever going to hear. This person actually bought the CLS a year ago. It only had 140,000 kilometers on it. He only drove it for 150 kilometers. That's it, not 150,000 or something. And in that 150 kilometers, he actually blew a head gasket, because of which he had to take the heads off, give them for machining, put it back together. And right when the car was put back together, it had another really big problem. It broke a piston. So that's where the car is right now. The task for today is to take the engine out, disassemble the engine and see how much damage is inside it, whether it can actually be rebuilt, whether it's just as simple as putting a new piston in there and rebuilding the engine and getting it to work, or whether there's some other damage inside the block, which means either getting another block or getting another used engine, whichever would be the cheaper option in that case. So yeah, quite a lot of work to do on this car. Let's get started by pulling the engine out, putting it on an engine stand, and then disassembling it and seeing what we figure out. So for removing the engine from the car, we started off by lifting the car on the two-post lift. I had a friend helping me out with this one, by the way. Now for removing the engine, I decided to remove it from underneath the car together with the subframe and the transmission. That usually works out to be the easier way in these cars. The other way of removing the engine is to remove it from the top by disconnecting the engine from the transmission and from the subframe. But when you try to do it that way, there's a few awkward bolts that you have to reach, like the transmission bell housing bolts and also a few other bolts underneath the car. So that's why generally this way actually works out to be quicker and easier, just dropping the whole thing from underneath the car. So before we could drop the engine and the transmission, we of course had to remove all the lines that are going from the engine and transmission to the radiators. So this includes the transmission cooler lines, the engine oil cooler lines, the coolant lines going from the engine to the radiator, and also actually the air conditioner compressor lines going from the air conditioner compressor to the rest of the car. So just make sure to vacuum out the air conditioner refrigerant before starting this. Once all the fluid lines were removed, next it was on to a few electrical connectors and wires that needed to be removed, and also the exhaust actually, because for this one we just removed the entire exhaust in one piece because the exhaust flanges were way too rusty. So if we attempted to remove the exhaust in sections, there was a big chance that we would have broken a bolt or two, and then it's a hassle putting everything back together. That's why it sometimes works out easier just dropping the whole exhaust in one piece out of the car. That way there's only two flanges that you need to change the bolts for. Once most of the work was done underneath the car, it was time to lower it and remove a few more things from the top. This included all the wires going to the ECU, the fuel line going to the engine, and a few more coolant lines. Once all that was done, it was time to lift the car once more to remove a few more final things underneath the car, like the suspension control arms. They had to be taken out because I was dropping the subframe, and everything that links to the subframe has to be taken out in order for the subframe to drop down. So after removing quite a few things from the car, now I should finally be at the point where I can separate the engine and transmission from the rest of the chassis and lower it. But quickly going over everything that I've had to remove. So I've had to remove all the electrical lines that were going from the chassis to the engine or transmission. I've had to remove all the fluid lines that were going from the engine to the radiators and everything. The radiators are still going to stay in place, but the engine, the subframe and the transmission are going to come down. Also, the suspension is going to stay in place, so I've disconnected the control arms from here. Obviously, I'll need to do an alignment when I put them back in. For the transmission, I've had to disconnect the propeller shaft, this shaft that goes to the shifter, and of course all the wires, the ground wire, the steering thing that goes to the steering wheel, the whole exhaust, and the same on this side, the suspension. So now the next thing I will do is that right now the only thing holding the engine subframe and the engine and the transmission up is a few bolts over here. This is one bolt, there's the other bolt, and there was also a bolt at the front over here that I've already removed because this one is under too much stress. So to make my job easier, I've already taken the front two out. And on the transmission, it's these two bolts. These are also two of them I've already taken out just to make my job easier once I'm finally removing this. So basically now what I need to do is that I need to lower everything, place the subframe on axle stands and also put an axle stand over here, and then I will remove these last few final bolts, and then I will lift the rest of the car up, and the engine and transmission should hopefully stay on axle stands then, and that's how they will get separated from the rest of the car. So there it is, the engine is finally outside the car, and while just showing you guys the engine from the outside, this is number 7, the cylinder inside which the piston is broken, and at least looking at it from the outside, the first good sign is that at least the piston hasn't made its way through the block. Like from my E55 engine, when I blew my engine, the connecting rod actually broke through the block, and there was a massive hole in the block on the side, so that's when I knew immediately that the engine can't be rebuilt. But this one actually broke on idle, or not even at idle, at startup, so that's why I'm really hoping that it's only a broken piston and it didn't break too many things along with it, but of course we won't really find out until we take everything apart. But at least looking at the engine from the outside, you can definitely see that this owner has spent quite a bit of time and effort on this engine. You can see new engine mounts over here, new cylinder head, well not new, but it was machined and resurfaced, I believe, all new bolts. New oil cooler over there. Even when you look at the front of the engine, so many of these pulleys are new supercharger, idler pulley, tensioner. He put a smaller, I believe this is the 82 millimeter pulley, or I'm not sure which one it is, but seems like a new water pump, new thermostat housing, I believe, too. So yeah, definitely changed a lot of parts on it, put a lot of effort on it, and it's just really sad to see that he never really got it working. Because after he blew the head gasket, he fixed all that stuff, put the engine back together, only got to drive it for 150 kilometers, and now he has a broken piston. So that's definitely a bit of a sad story. But I'm really hoping that it's not too much more than a broken piston. Tomorrow when I come in, I'm going to be taking this engine apart, taking only that side of the engine apart just to see what is inside number 7. So the next day when I came in, there was also another really interesting car that showed up. This person actually drove all the way from Montreal in this car to come over here and get an alignment done. So I really wanted to include this car in the video too, because not only is it a cool project, but that's the farthest I think anyone has driven to come to this shop so far. Alright Winston, tell us about the car.
Well, here's our Volkswagen powered, or base, Subaru powered Manx. It's a dune buggy from Iris Manx. It's got a Subaru motor in it, out of a WRX 2015.
Yeah, let's actually go to the back, see the motor and everything.
It's got about maybe 280.
So flat 4, right?
Flat 4 boxer.
Nice.
Water cool. With a turbo. It's a 2-liter turbo.
And here's a look inside.
This one's been autographed by Bruce Myers.
Oh, nice.
The inventor of the dune buggy in California.
That's the fuel tank?
Yep,
Fuel cell?
yeah. It's about 17 gallons.
That's the interior.
Running the Subaru Dash.
What is the pedal box, by the way?
That's OBP. They're made out of UK.
Oh,
it's racing pedals.
Pretty cool.
With a drive-by-wire.
Yeah.
The seats are out of Lotus Evora 400.
And does the roll cage also come with the kit?
It comes with the kit, yeah. The soft top doesn't. I borrowed my mother-in-law's sewing machine and
really?
Put that together.
You sewed this yourself?
Yeah, I mean it's not perfect, but it does the job.
Well, I mean the coolest part is he drove here on this car from Montreal, which is like a 5-hour drive. And the car actually made it here, and it still drives fine and everything. So.
Well, we made it to California last year, all the way
That's
from
crazy.
Montreal to California.
That's crazy. So after having quite a bit of fun with our cars, it was finally time to get back to the broken CLS, tearing the engine apart. So not even a third of a way into the teardown, I realized something really weird going on. There's pieces of metal all inside the supercharger, on the intake valves, and well, where I first found them, in the plenums for the supercharger. There's whole bits of aluminum, and I'm not sure where that came from, whether it's pieces of piston or whether that's pieces of supercharger. But even if it's like a piece of piston. I'm not sure how that can go all the way back there, so there's definitely something funny going on inside here, but I guess I'll need to pull off the rest of it to find out. Holy crap, man, no piston inside it at all.
Okay, so that, the block's gone.
Oh my god, no! No! I was really hoping not to see that. Okay, after taking everything apart, this was really not the outcome I was hoping for, but here's a look at what had happened. We had scoped this engine before, we had tried to look inside it, but of course scopes don't give you the full picture. You can't really see what's up top, you only see like somewhere in that region, but now taking it apart, it's not good at all. The cylinder wall has literally broken apart. There's no chance of a rebuild on this one. It's done. There's pieces of piston in every different cylinder. Actually, I have no idea how they even made their way into these ones, but that's the thing. There's pieces of piston ring. It's almost demolished completely. In fact, that is the piston down there. That thing that you see over there, that's the piston, and I have no idea how it even got there. That's the connecting rod and the wrist pin, and they're fine for some reason, but everything else is just shattered completely. So yeah, and I believe when if I ever take the bottom end apart, I believe it will be the same story too, because that piston went there because of the crank spinning. Of course, that would have done even more damage. So that's why I didn't put this engine on an engine stand, because I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay over here. But of course, that's not okay, so there's not even a point putting this engine on the engine stand. But after discussing everything with the owner, I think I have an idea of what happened on it. There's a exhaust valve that is broken on that cylinder head on the same number 7, and apparently what would have happened was that he changed the timing chain tensioner on it. It's a little part that goes over here that keeps the timing chain under tension, and well, he actually replaced the heads first and the whole thing was working, but it was leaking oil from that little timing chain tensioner. So he had to change the seal on it, so he removed it. But the only little bit of mistake he did was that he did not lock the crank at 40 degrees. So whenever you remove the heads on these, or whenever you do anything with the timing chain, make sure that the crank is at 40 degrees, because that makes sure that none of the pistons are at top dead center. So what I'm guessing is that what would have happened is that's the time when the exhaust valve went down and hit a piston and it bent. In fact, the valve on this exhaust was actually broken completely, like the whole head is missing from that valve. So then that valve bouncing up and down in the cylinder while the engine was possibly running, that's probably what broke the piston, and eventually all this damage happened. So yeah, that's pretty sad for this engine. This will definitely not get to live on, but of course the only option from now is to find a used engine and fit that in this car. So that is going to be everything for this video. The fate of the CLS 55 is really undetermined right now, because I talked to the owner and he is not too happy about the whole. He's pretty disappointed, to be honest, and I don't blame him. If this all happened to me, I would be pretty sick of the car too. But yeah, let's see which way it goes. I don't have an answer for that right now. I have been playing around with the CNC machine though quite a bit. I was machining this table actually. This is something that I'm going to be using for future parts as a fixture to bolt parts on. But yeah, I have quite a lot of cool content coming on this machine really soon. So hopefully once I finish on a few parts, I will upload a video on this, and it's super cool. I'm literally addicted to this machine. Every time I start using it, a whole day goes by and I get nothing done. Anyways, this is going to be everything for now. If you have any problems with your engine, or if you want custom parts made, the place is XF Motorsports. The website is xfmotorsports.com. I will link it down in the description below. The Instagram is also xfmotorsports.com. So yeah, that's going to be everything for now. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys again really soon in the next one.